Time passes on, but over the centuries man has sought ways to capture and record time, and to make time more fun. In 1977, the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors established their Watch and Clock Museum to preserve and illustrate the history of timekeeping. This ever-growing museum exhibits timepieces, tools, and related material from a collection of more than 8,000 items and is one of the more comprehensive collections in the country. NAWCC began in 1943 as a small group of people who shared a common interest in watch and clock collecting. In the early 1950s, Millard Strickler and his son Earl became treasurer and secretary of the growing organization. From their house in Columbia, Pennsylvania, they organized the association records and edited the Bulletin, the association's regular publication. As a result of their active leadership, Columbia eventually became the headquarters of the young organization. The NAWCC collections and offices soon outgrew the Strickler home, and the association had to rent office space in a nearby bank building. Then, in 1972, the association purchased their present building on Poplar Street in Columbia, and in 1977, the museum was opened to the public. Built into the exterior wall of the museum is the original tower clock from the Coakley Brothers store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This clock was built by the Seth Thomas Clock Company in 1925. The 4-dial Seth Thomas street clock, standing outside the building, was donated to the museum in 1992, and it was restored by museum staff and volunteers. In 1993, a 3-dial McClintock was restored by the association's Minnesota Chapter No. 20 and attached to the building. That same year, a 70-foot-high tower was built at the corner of the NAWCC property. It houses a Howard Tower Clock movement, which strikes Westminster chimes on 4 bells. This entire project was planned and executed over several years and was financed entirely through donations from the NAWCC membership and the local business community. The clock movement used inside the tower was made circa 1900. The 4 cast bronze bells originally used with the clock were Healy Brothers in Troy, New York. Adjacent to the building entrance is the symbol of the NAWCC, a Victorian gentleman known commonly as the Little Man, who is comparing his watch to a sundial. The Latin saying tempus vitam regit translates into time rules life. Once inside the doors, visitors to the museum are greeted by an E. Howard regulator. Just down the hall is the entrance to the galleries. The museum is laid out chronologically, starting with a display on early timekeeping devices. In ancient times, the passage of time was measured by the travels of the sun across the sky or the changing water levels in a special container. A sundial measures true solar time and is known as a natural timekeeper. A clepsydra, whose literal translation means water thief, was one of several forms of water clocks. By measuring the flow of water into or out of a container, the passage of time was calculated. This piece is a scale model of an outflow clepsydra used in Egypt during the 15th century BC. Mechanical timekeepers as we know them today first appeared in the 13th century. These devices divided time into short intervals. Time was measured by counting the number of intervals that were generated. By the 15th century AD, timepieces small enough to be carried had been developed, although these watches were certainly not common. The Stackfried mechanism, developed in the 16th century, was a component of a watch that attempted to make the time divisions uniform. Early clocks and watches were often great examples of both art and technical workmanship, but invariably they were poor timekeepers. Pieces made before 1650 were unable to achieve satisfactory timekeeping. The introduction of the fusee was instrumental in making time divisions uniform and was an important step in improving the timekeeping ability of both watches and spring-driven clocks. Two critical inventions that launched the modern era of mechanical timekeeping occurred during the 17th century. One was the use of the pendulum in a clock as a rate controller. The other was the invention of the hairspring for balance wheel timepieces. The use of a long pendulum led to the development of the tall case clock. Without a case to protect it, the pendulum was susceptible to being bumped. The term grandfather clock was not used until 1875, when a popular song entitled "My Grandfather's Clock" was released. This tall case clock by Joseph Knibb is dated 1690. The case is made of ebonized oak with ormolu mounts in a classic design typical of the very earliest tall case clocks. This piece is unusually small, standing less than 6 feet high. Joseph Knibb and his brother John are among the most famous English clockmakers. The half-century between 1675 and 1725 is often called the Golden Age of English clockmaking. Thomas Tompion, Daniel Quare, the Knibb family, and many others produced masterpieces that even today are without peer. Outstanding examples of both clocks and watches were produced in England and Europe throughout the 18th century. Regional case styles from this time period are interesting to compare. The conservative English design used by Thomas Mudge makes the Louis XV case of Frenchman Bertrand appear extreme and flamboyant. The classic Dutch tall case often incorporated a Bombay-shaped base to support the nearly 10-foot tall case. Japan preferred not only an entirely different type of case design, but also used a unique system of timekeeping, which included adjusting the length of an hour depending on the season of the year. Pierre Jacques-Dreux lived and worked in Geneva in the late 1700s. He made this bracket clock with a small barrel organ which plays a set of metal flute pipes. Many German makers used wooden movements. This Prussian piece was made in 1770 and plays 6 different tunes on glass bells. The first clockmaking in America began shortly after 1700 in the major port cities of Philadelphia and Boston. An example of an early American timepiece is this clock by David Rittenhouse, a clockmaker in Philadelphia from 1749 to 1770. European and English influence is shown in the details of case construction, dial design, and movement layout of American clocks of this period. American tall clocks prior to 1790 typically used an English-style dial made with a brass plate and a silvered chapter ring. The white painted dial became popular after the Revolution. They were imported from England and also made in America. Features on this 1770 piece by Augustin Neisser, such as the rat-tail hinges, show a Germanic heritage, as does this clock movement by George Hoff of Pennsylvania. Hoff was known for his use of open-ended lantern pinions. John Ebermann's 30-hour movement was influenced by English design. The painted dial is believed to be American, and the case is typical of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In the late 1700s, a few clockmakers such as Thomas Parker produced small spring-driven clocks modeled after the English bracket clocks. Not many of these were made, and they are relatively rare today. Eardley Norton was an English clockmaker who had the unusual custom of writing his signature in reverse on the clock face. Nineteenth century Europe, the time of Brahms and Bizet, of Napoleon and Bismarck. It was an explosive period for technology, communications, and medicine. Victoria ruled England and lent her name to a changing society. And through it all, clock and watchmakers continued to produce, to innovate, and to delight. Abraham Louis Breguet is without doubt the most famous watchmaker of all time. Working in Paris, he provided the world's royalty with timepieces and accomplished technical achievements which remain unsurpassed. This watch, with a 5-minute repeat mechanism, was made for Napoleon's sister, Queen Caroline of Naples. It strikes the hour on one gong and strikes a lighter gong for every 5 minutes past the hour. By the 1800s, American clockmakers were producing a variety of case designs and were adding complications to the movements. One example is the musical tall clock, made by Martin Schreiner of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The clock plays 8 different tunes which change automatically on the hour. Meanwhile, in Massachusetts, the Willard family of clockmakers became renowned for the timepieces they produced. Simon and Aaron Willard were the most well-known. Many of their tall case clocks are housed in what is known as a Roxbury case, named after the community near Boston where cabinet makers who had developed this style lived. Details such as the applied fretwork, the fluted columns with brass stop fluting, and the OG bracket feet continue to show the English influence on American work. In 1802, Simon Willard received a patent for what he called an improved timepiece. Due to its unique shape, the clock has come to be known as the banjo clock. This style is considered the first truly American case design. This clock, made by Benjamin Swan of Maine, is another example of an early American style. Due to its popularity and origins in southern New England, this style is known as the Massachusetts shelf clock. American clockmakers depended on England for their brass, but after the Revolution, exports to America were tightly controlled. Therefore, many American clockmakers designed unusual movements using as little raw material as possible. New Hampshire mirror clocks, such as this one by Collins, demonstrate this conservative use of raw materials. Until the early years of the 19th century, all clocks made in America were individually crafted and did not have interchangeable parts, even among clocks by the same maker. In the mid-Atlantic and southern states, the handcrafted tradition never evolved into an industry. But in Connecticut, where the American brass industry was developing, the clockmaking industry took root. By the end of the 18th century, Riley Whiting, along with other clockmakers of Connecticut, had begun to produce large quantities of tall case clocks with wooden movements. These early movements were not made with completely interchangeable parts, but they were an early beginning of mass production. Eli Terry was instrumental in laying the foundation for the American clock industry. Terry, an established clockmaker in Connecticut, was granted the first American clockmaking patent. He designed and perfected the process for making wooden tall clock movements with interchangeable parts, and went on to develop a wooden shelf clock movement and a case to house it. The result was the famous pillar and scroll clock. This clock set the direction for the Connecticut clock industry. The wooden movement was a staple of American shelf clocks until it was replaced by the inexpensive rolled brass clock movement of the 1840s. From then until the late 1850s, many innovative or transitional clocks of varying sizes, shapes, and styles were made in New England. Early in the 19th century, a good and reliable spring had not yet been developed in America. Manufacturers experimented with a variety of designs which used a substitute form of power. Joseph Ives and J.C. Brown were two prolific clockmakers who produced a number of designs using alternative motive forces. Examples include several designs powered by a wagon or leaf spring and a variety of fusee arrangements. Several New York clockmakers had their own distinct designs and methods of manufacturing. For instance, Asa Munger was known to use prison labor to build his clocks. Abner Jones frequently made unusual cases, many having other functions such as this dressing table clock. After 1800, American clockmaking was firmly on its own path. Large companies such as Seth Thomas and Chauncey Jerome were mass-producing thousands of clocks. Their catalogs illustrate the variety of models available in all price ranges. Familiar names like Ansonia, Howard, Waterbury, and Welsh appeared as clockmaking corporations. More clocks with specialized functions began to appear, such as railroad regulators, advertising clocks, and calendar clocks. German and French clockmakers were pursuing their own distinctive styles. Many of the French clocks were highly decorated and ornamented, in keeping with the furniture of the period. Others were done in neoclassical designs. Generally, the French clock movements remained consistent between makers, but the clock cases used a variety of materials. Legends from classic mythology were portrayed in cases made of fire-gilded metal, bronze with massive marble bases, and marble alone. Elaborate cases decorated with tortoiseshell and brass were first introduced in the late 1600s by André Boulle. There was a great resurgence of the Boulle marquetry after 1850, and many copies of pieces originally designed in the 1700s were produced. German clocks were often less delicate in appearance. Clocks from Bavaria, including the famous cuckoo clock, favored carvings that represented the region, such as native birds and animals. Compared with colonial clockmakers, American watchmakers were scarce at the beginning of the 19th century. Only a few people actually experimented with the design of the mechanism. Most American watchmakers at this time simply imported English movements and put their name on them. In 1820, Luther Goddard of Massachusetts sold his own watches for almost $60 apiece, more than most people's annual income. He is credited with establishing the first watch factory in the United States. Two other early American watchmakers credited with designing original movements are J. H. Melford of New York and N. C. Greenough of Massachusetts. The American watch industry began in earnest in 1851 with the start of the American Waltham Watch Company. Its zenith coincided with the railroad boom of the 19th century. The watch industry continued the tradition which Eli Terry had begun for the clockmaking industry, that of mass-producing items through a factory system using interchangeable parts. American watchmaking was considered the most innovative industry in terms of establishing automated systems. It is recognized as a major contributor to industries worldwide. The pocket watches on exhibit in our museum are representative of the numerous models manufactured by both American and European makers. They are the evidence of a rich heritage of skilled design and craftsmanship in manufacturing, which is unequaled today. Their excellence in handcrafted movements continues today. This pocket watch, made in 1947, is an example of the company's superb watchmaking skill. The 39-jewel movement is a split-second chronograph with a 5-minute repeat mechanism. It also has a moon phase indicator and a perpetual calendar showing the day of the week, the date, and the month. Every mechanical clock operates on the principle of separating time into intervals of known length, and then counting the intervals that have passed from a given starting point. The part of the mechanism that accomplishes this is the escapement, the heart of any mechanical timepiece. As it performs its time chopping function, it allows the driving energy to escape, thus the name escapement. The most common escapements for clocks are the recoil, deadbeat, and verge escapements. And for watches, the lever, cylinder, and detent escapements. A great variety of other escapements have been developed as well. The museum is fortunate to possess an outstanding collection of escapement models made by NAWCC member Dr. Fred Beeler of Michigan. The regulator, or precision timepiece, had been introduced by the early 18th century. The regulator is a timepiece more accurate than the average domestic clock. Regulators were required by astronomers and surveyors whose observations demanded accuracy. In the later 19th century, regulators were found in offices, railroad stations, scientific laboratories, and the workshops of watch and clockmakers, who used them to test the performance of other timepieces they made or repaired. Designed exclusively for keeping time, regulators omitted any non-essential complications, such as striking or calendar work, A true regulator is often fitted with a deadbeat escapement, although the pinwheel and three-legged gravity escapement are also commonly found. The dial normally has separate chapter rings for seconds, minutes, and hours. The minute chapter ring and hand are usually the most prominent. The tools of watch and clockmakers have varied from simplistic hand tools to specialized machinery. The machine used to make the gears of a timepiece is known as a wheel-cutting engine. This particular machine was made in France and was used at the end of the 1700s to rough-cut gears. A blank wheel was first shaped by hand from cast brass. The wheel was then fastened on the machine and the guide placed on the index plate to position the gear for cutting the correct number of teeth. After the rough cut was completed, a rounding up tool was used to finish each tooth on the gear. Some of the craftsman's tools have changed very little over the past 200 years. The bench lathe is an important tool used both for repair work and finishing new pieces. The only real change to the design of this tool has been the evolution from a foot treadle operation to an electric motor. Many of the tools and techniques used by the individual maker were also used in the factory. The museum exhibits a variety of watchmaking and clockmaking tools. Visitors can observe the activities of a modern-day repair shop through a viewing window which looks into the conservator's work area. An early 20th century jeweler's shop has been installed at the museum and features timepieces that were available to the general public around the turn of the century. The earliest records of mechanical clocks refer to public clocks, those in public buildings which served an entire community. The tradition of public clocks has continued to this day in tower and street clocks. Rather than solid weights, wooden buckets were sometimes used to power tower clock movements by filling them with scrap metal. Throughout the museum are a number of tower and street clock movements. There is another class of clocks which can only be described as monumental. These pieces were made primarily for exhibition. Timekeeping often seems to be an almost secondary function. German musical clocks, such as this example, were found in public places such as roadside inns and served as a form of entertainment for the guests. Other timepieces are one of a kind and were made for a specific international exhibition. This globe clock was made by Tiffany's for the Columbian exhibition in 1893. It is made entirely of sterling silver with blue enamel. This statue clock was made by Farcot in Paris, specifically for the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition of 1876. A small number of these unique timepieces were made by James Tourling in the 1850s. The Tourling screw clock was made for special presentation to J.C. Kennedy, director of the U.S. Census Bureau, in 1857. The Engel clock was made by Stephen Engel of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, over a period of 20 years. When he completed the clock in 1878, it was taken around the countryside by wagon to be displayed at fairs and exhibitions. Fully restored now through the volunteer efforts of many talented members of the NAWCC, the clock is once again in full working order. This clock has 48 moving figures and 2 barrel organs, along with Engel's patented invention called a tellurian, which functioned both as an astronomical map and a world timepiece. The first electrically driven clock was made as early as 1840, but it was not until the early 1900s that electricity and electronics began to invade the mechanical world of horology. Electrical timepieces vary in the way electricity is used in the operation of the clock. Some clocks feature a mechanical movement, which is either directly powered by electricity or has an electrically wound power source. There are electrical clocks in which a pendulum receives electrical impulses, and the motion of the pendulum then drives the clock. The synchronome clock, the most accurate of its time, was developed in 1921 and maintained an accuracy within 10 seconds per year. The pendulum of the synchronome receives an electrically generated impulse once every minute. The regulators which were developed during the advent of electrical impulsing were frequently used to check the accuracy of chronometers. Chronometers were used for navigation until the advent of satellite and quartz technology in the early 1970s. Hamilton was the most famous of the U.S. chronometer manufacturers. During World War II, Hamilton manufactured a chronometer which surpassed that of the most famous European makers. This is an early model of an atomic clock made in 1963. Rather than a pendulum swinging back and forth once a second, vibrations of a radioactive cesium crystal measure each second. Today, the world time system is maintained on atomic clocks much smaller than this. Time signals from each of the 24 time zones are coordinated in Paris to produce a single time signal called Universal Coordinated Time. From its beginning, American horology was built on European tradition. Wristwatches continued that tradition into the 20th century. American soldiers brought these watches home after World War I. Wristwatches quickly gained the attention of fashion designers and became objects for personal decoration as well as practical function. Technology, particularly in connection with the wristwatch, advanced rapidly in the 20th century. The Hamilton Watch Company introduced the first mass-produced electric watch in 1956. Bulova produced its electronic Accutron watch with its ever-humming tuning fork 1 year later. In 1967, Seiko introduced the first commercially available quartz wristwatch. By the turn of the century, mass merchandising of clocks and watches gave rise to a staggering variety of products in an effort to appeal to many special interests. Novelty items of all types were designed. Clocks that use swinging dials for pendulums. Clocks with blinking eyes. Clocks and watches designed to appeal to children, and miniature clocks of all descriptions. As we have walked through the museum, we have had the opportunity to see and admire the craftsmanship and ingenuity from the past. The craftsmanship and ingenuity of the present are also illustrated here through many timepieces made by our own members. Among the members of the NAWCC, there is a distinctive group who delight in designing and making timepieces. Some of them participate in the annual craft contests held in conjunction with our national conventions. From these contests, as well as from private initiative, have come these masterpieces of today. The museum is fortunate to be able to exhibit the work of a number of craft contest winners as part of its permanent collection, and is very proud to share these with the public. Special temporary exhibits are also part of the visitor's museum experience. These temporary exhibits are organized by the museum staff or guest curators and display items from outside the NAWCC collection. Each special exhibit focuses on a single topic and gives the visitor an in-depth look at a specific type of timepiece or related item. Some of the selected topics which have been interpreted in temporary exhibits have included clockmakers from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire timepieces, clockwork toys, clocks of the Susquehanna Valley, music boxes, and military timepieces. The collections of the NAWCC Museum cover a span of over 300 years. They cover in detail the arts and crafts that man used to measure and record time. The various collections within the museum are rich with the beauty and ingenuity that have been lavished on the objects of horology. We hope you have enjoyed this tour through the Watch and Clock Museum, and yet we have only scratched the surface of this museum's extensive collections. This is truly a museum to instruct and entertain you. Designed for self-guided tours, it is laid out chronologically. Throughout, the diagrams and narratives describe in detail how different timekeeping devices work. Each item on display is identified with the item's name, its maker, the year of manufacture, and any other pertinent details. Contemporary world events are also highlighted to provide a time of reference context. Audio boxes offer narratives of special topics of interest.
The watches were entered in Swiss time trials and proved to be 100.
Visitors to the museum are also able to watch part of the restoration process as technicians carefully restore items in the museum collection to their original beauty. Also located at the headquarters building is the museum's library, which houses the research and lending collections of the NAWCC. It is considered the largest horological reference library in the country. It maintains copies of more than 21,000 U.S. horological patents and is highly regarded for its collection of 19th century trade publications. The library's resources are used to document timepieces from around the world. Members have free use of the lending library as well as the research services of our expert staff. Our museum collections here are constantly changing and expanding as we continue to define and secure new acquisitions, either through gifts, purchases, or loans. The museum building has twice been enlarged to accommodate our growing collections. We're located along the banks of the Susquehanna River in Columbia, Pennsylvania, the gateway to Lancaster County and the Pennsylvania Dutch Country. With the many attractions in Lancaster, Philadelphia, and Baltimore nearby, there is all the more reason to plan a trip. Our vision is a museum that will grow and change and continually improve. We hope you'll be able to visit the museum and the headquarters of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors in the very near future.